Hey guys, got a ZVZ for you this time. You're probably wondering what the hell is he doing playing StarCraft when it's not the end of the week. I didn't knock out my running goal yet, but I decided I'm going to allow myself a little more leeway. I'm going to allow myself to play unranked as long as I ran that day. Seems a little more fair, but if I want to dive into the ranked, I still got to hit my goal. And we'll see. If I find that I'm abusing that and I'm spending too much time gaming still, then I'll cut it back. But the way I see it is kind of foolproof because I can't play any day that I didn't run, so there you have it. Anyways, today we've got me as the blue Zerg player in the lower left versus Geeden, the red Zerg player in the upper right. And this CVZ is pretty fun, so figured it was worth a cast. And I wanted to cast it tonight before I forgot. I wanted to get to that free-for-all that we played on Sunday, but that one I have marked and I won't forget. This one I'll probably forget before I even get to the weekend, because it's just one of those times right now where I can't keep up with anything. I forget everything the next day. I'm thinking, since this one's a little long as ZVZ goes, I'm going to go double speed a little bit here. 11 over pool, pretty standard for me. This is going to be an 11 over pool. I believe 12 gas. I may go a little late into 13 gas. Now it looks like 13 gas. Either one's fine. And I forget that this is cross map only. Anyone who's not yet aware of that, has been changed. I think it was a stealth change too. Either that or I'm just not very observant, which is also very likely. My opponent looks like thus far we're going for a gasless pool first expand. So pretty solid build on his part. Very comfortable economy on this map. However, given that it's now cross only, he's going to have a little bit of vulnerability to 10 pool and some of the more aggressive ones, 7 or 8 pool, since there's no longer the need for scouting. But nevertheless, works out pretty well for him here. And I wonder when I want to go till for 2 speed. We'll go ahead and let it go a little bit longer here. Go ahead and drop my hatch here at around 22 supply. So I make 2 drones after the Overlord pops from that 11 over pool. And then that gives me enough economy to go ahead and hit a pretty decent timing if I see something that's vulnerable to it. However, if we look at my production here, we're just drone. Because my opponent is gasless, and basically there was a combination of 2 factors that resulted in this. My opponent's gasless, and the spine was starting when my lings are already arrived, which is pretty much indicative that I'm not going to be able to do any damage. I mean, maybe I get a drone or 2, but it's going to cost me a lot of lings. Oh, it's worth noting that you might see some sloppiness like this Overlord this game. That's because you know how I am. Work days, I'm not too awesome. So he's going to get those that Overlord cleaned up. This game actually does turn out to be really cool, though, despite a few little sloppy mistakes on my part. Okay, so I do like this, because at this point we're keeping up on drones. We fell behind on economy earlier, since my opponent did open gasless. And the response I'm more and more trying is, quick, double gas, mine, get all that gas, double evo chamber, and just get a really fast 1-1. So that I put him in a situation where one of 2 things that gasless likes to do, either fast mute off 2 bays, or really fast third the moment their metabolic's about to finish. And once in a rare while, maybe they go straight into roach and take a third behind that. I've seen that a couple times too. So the 1-1, as always, that's what I like to go for. But in this case, I'm actually skipping the baneling nest and grabbing some spines instead. I'm just trying to poke around to see if I can get an idea of his drone count. Now, if I was a really good Zerg player, ZVZ player, I'd be popping an Overlord back here from time to time to keep an eye on that back there. But I'm not a really good ZVZ player. I'm just a really average ZVZ player who wins with gimmicks, and I admit it. So he's getting a big scat in here because I'm sloppy, so that's pretty cool for him. Getting to see the 1-1. Doesn't get to see when it started, so more often than not, they're going to assume it's quite a bit later than it is. I'm way behind on drones right now, and that's some of that's the nature of going up against an opponent who's able to get those double injections going so much earlier. Also, I felt like, well, I've had some times where I've opened like this against gasless, and right as I'm taking my third, it turns out they had a surprise, 50 speed link, 60 speed link build up for me. So it's one of those situations where I guess I could correct it by that Overlord positioning that I was mentioning. Otherwise, it feels like I'm in this situation where I just have to blindly build for it. So this is interesting. I'm not sure if he saw the hatch go down. I'm not sure what all 3 of these spines are for. I guess maybe he feels that, given that he's got the spire on the way, he's going to be able to deny my third and comfortably take his own. And now we know from many ZVZs watching 1-1 versus Muta, that's very unstable, especially since the Spore buff. So at this point I'm feeling pretty good, and as long as I can just get my drones even five above his and just keep him from taking his third, then I'm going to be a pretty happy camper. But for now he's quite a bit ahead. Alright, so 1-1 timing finishes, and here's the other big change that I'm making, is notice I'm still just kind of good to go here. Once I realize he wants to take his third, then I make some Zerglings, but I'm not building up for an all-in like I used to. And we look at his Banelings and Spine positioning, probably wouldn't have done much with it. Now I still think, actually I would say my drone count maybe is lower than it should be right now, but nevertheless, with that 1-1 advantage we can afford to be low econ. So pretty good trade there. That was, I believe, 4 Zerglings, maybe 5 Zerglings for 2 Banelings. This Spine, I had an opportunity to see if I could run by and do something, but I felt like, ooh, that was a bad trade. Well, it's like 3 per Baneling. I feel like it's more important to dislodge a well-placed Spine like that, because when I get a surround on a hatchery, that Spine's going to be poking at the edges, and going to actually make killing a hatchery much more costly. So here we are now. We're finally starting to get to the point that we are able to start surpassing his mineral income. We won't surpass his gas income for quite some time. And that's really, sorry, should have caught that. I basically just poke up, see if I can snipe a couple Banelings, and I do succeed. I get just a couple. So, since we're on 1-1 Ling, and his mutas are pretty much entirely nullified by spores and the mobility of Lings, we are actually just concerned about the mineral income until he starts switching into Banelings rather than mutas. But until then, with these new spores, I mean, look at how fast that muta dropped. It took 1 shot there and 2 shots there, and it was done. And that's just a really cool thing about this. Is, it puts us in this position. Whoops, on my part. But I get a trade there. It puts us in this position where we can basically just boil the game down to who makes more minerals. And whoever makes more minerals is going to be able to make more drones, and that's kind of where we want to be. So, continuing to trade away Zerglings for hatchery. Notice he's actually behind on losses. I think, actually, or ahead on losses, depending on how you look at it. I think, actually, the hatchery still incorrectly counts the entire... we can back up a second. For a long time, buildings when they were Zerg buildings when they were canceled, it still gave the full value. I'll fast forward here after we find out. Yeah, I believe it's still giving the full value. So 1200, 1200, 1200, 1200, 1200. No, it does not, actually. Never mind. Okay, so they fixed that. That's good. We're going to catch up a bit. Okay, so I am actually doing pretty well on losses. I didn't think I was doing that well by this stage. Alright, my minerals are starting to float pretty high, and this is... I'm sorry, his minerals are starting to float really high. My spending's nice and clean. Never mind. Man, terrible casting today. I apologize. So yeah, one thing that I notice here, and this is something that I kind of realized the moment I made the mistake earlier today, was being completely immune to his spores, or to his mutas, is all well and good. But I think I'm going to, especially once I realize that I've pulled ahead on mineral income, I'm going to start just, getting 4 to 5 spines, really. Because the run-by is going to be something that is going to be fairly consistent here by a certain point in this. So he's moving in, taking a ton of damage from those spores. I love it. At this point, I just go ahead and say, okay, well, hopefully he hasn't held any Banelings back, and sure enough he did not. Even if he did, I'd probably be able to get in with some damage. So we're doing a bit of a trade here, but I like this trade, obviously, because it's going to be his main, and he already, again was denied his third for my main or for my third. So that naturally is going to put me way ahead on economy. This again is just coming back to what those 1-1 speedlings provide us. Starting to get that queen build up, and I'm starting to switch into missile upgrades. I may start grabbing the +2 melee as well, because I'm finding more and more that the Lings need to stay active the entire game. It used to be I would discontinue the Lings and just go into a Queen Hydra push, into Swarmhost if they're vulnerable to it, maybe no Swarmhost. But these days, I think the Lings pretty much always need to be active on the map, even once the opponent has Banelings out. If you don't force those Banelings, then you're allowing them room into like an Ultra switch, and you really don't want that. Ultras actually do incredibly well versus Swarmhost. At least I should say Swarmhost in the numbers that you're going to want to use them in ZVZ. Typically ZVZ, you're going to be using them in 6 to 8, 10 maybe. Just to force some losses, you're not going to be making the 24 plus that you would make in ZVP and ZVT sometimes, which is when you can start to one-shot those ultras as they're moving in. Alright, cutting them off, and I'm setting up a creep highway. Again with the theme of just, hey, let's deny that third at all costs. And so making the creep highway, I may be actually pushing out a little sooner than I should. And I also probably should morph some banelings with this. I kind of get a little overconfident in my 1-1. But nevertheless, the creep highway is just about ready. These two overlords are out of position, otherwise these queens would be already ready to go. But the important thing is this pushed him back from the third. Now, one thing... didn't get the cancel. One thing that I do want to keep in mind here and maybe take into consideration later on is that in that kind of situation, I may be better off to go ahead and say, okay, let's pull back. I bet you I forced a commitment to banelings. Let's pull back and get those Swarmhosts out to counter them. So I split okay. I certainly could have done a lot better. But nevertheless, I'm able to survive with enough units to go ahead and keep the contain alive. With my 2, or I guess this would be called 2-1. I would rather call this 1-2. Anyways, with my upgraded advantage, I'm going to be able to push him back, and got enough transfusions for that. Now this, admittedly, that's a manor hatch. I just kind of wanted to have the fun of dropping a hatchery, and when he tries to take his 4th ever, he'll realize it's been there, but more than likely he's going to snipe it with mutas or zerglings or something. Part of me was kind of thinking if he let it live, I was going to get really cute with it too. Going to, just start pushing spores and spines up from it. Something stupid. It's that time of the day. I've been working all day. I feel like trying stupid stuff. And we're going to see all sorts of stupid stuff this game, so that's the fun part. Alright, so he's finally breaking free. That main is very low mining because he doesn't want to mine it out, so he's just pushing the efficiency on that natural. And he spots that proxy 4th, I guess it would be. Finally get my 3rd back up. And just due to mostly just having that 3rd and a little better mining efficiency, I'm able to pull ahead a little bit on both minerals and actually gas, because it looks like he is missing some gas mining. There it is. Actually, and the 2 on that one. Good fun. Alright, so I shoot his zerglings away, but the mutas show up. No surprise there, the manor hatch goes down. Alright. Man, ZDZ's tough to cast. There's so much going on, but none of it's analysis. Anyways, so from my perspective here, actually, I should have had my Swarmhost transition already finished, but it's actually just starting. I would say by the time that first push is moving out, I need to have Swarmhost building up for the second push. Because more and more I'm starting to like a Swarmhost Spore Infester push for this, because I'm finding when they're commuted to mutas, especially with this many mutas, I mean that's a lot of supply and a lot of resources off of just 2 bases to be committed into mutas. Anyways, when they are committed to that, then it's almost impossible for them to break Spore and Spine, especially if you've got a few infestors covering against banelings. So I would like to have seen that. Also, the decision making there with sniping that hatchery, obviously, since he's got the spines, blocking off maybe 2/3 of my surface area, and now he's actually getting really clever with it, blocking off way around this hatchery. Because he said, you know what, I'm done with the run-bys. Done with having this sniped every time I move out. So that's a good call on his part. So here we go. Tons of spores. Again, no spines covering the 3rd. That's just asking for it to get killed, and guess what? It gets killed. No surprise. But nevertheless, we've got a healthy push going, and this is actually a really scary push. With 45 damage versus biological, I mean, as long as I keep the spores tightly packed, it's just completely suicide for mutas to attempt anything against this. 5 to 6 spores is really all it's going to take, and then you just have them just hug the Swarmhost the entire way. You only pull up the spores when you know the mutas aren't close enough to snipe them. Alright, so here's another run by. I do get my drones out, so that's good. But I don't have a whole hell of a lot to stop it. I could pull up a spine, but then I'm running the risk of actually having a trade here. Up front, we're just kind of dancing a little bit. He's finally pulling ahead on mining, just because he's keeping that 3rd active, and he's sniping my own. So I've got to do some damage at this point, but the nice thing is, as long as I keep building up my Swarmhost count until it reaches 8 to 10, I'm pretty much getting some guaranteed damage here. So optimally, I should have actually pulled these back to save that 3rd. as I continue experimenting with this, I'm having to kind of build up my confidence in the spores. I keep guesstimating and saying, oh, 5 or 6 spores, they're going to totally snipe all of my Swarmhost before I can kill their Overseer, before I can kill enough of their mutas. But every time they directly engage against these 45 damage spores, I'm just pleasantly surprised, especially because the spores are going to target everything as they get close. So the muta in the front's going to eat one from that, and from that, and then as they continue flying in, then that, and that, and that, and then these 3 are ready to fire again, and so it's pretty cool. There's a bit of smart fire that goes on, even though it's projectile, so that also helps. Alright, so it's just a gradual crawl, and I'm keeping my Hydra Queen back for now. And more I'm wondering if maybe the Hydra Queen does need to stay exclusively defensive. Maybe I add a couple more spores, maybe even add a couple spines. But by and large, reasonable number of infestors are going to buy the time you need to keep Zerglings from cleaning up your Swarmhosts. And the spores, if you just are careful with them, you can target fire at any Overseers they bring along. So they're going to have a tough time killing your Swarmhosts with anything but Banelings anyways. So that's pretty cool. We're finally getting to the point here where we're providing a legitimate threat. And I love this for this map in particular, because we're putting him in a position where we're going to be able to hit either the natural or his army. He doesn't really have a safe place to move there. And that really gives us a great advantage here. But I've got a ton of spines to clean up here. And he's about to pull way ahead on economy with this 4th finishing up, although that was a bit of a quick pull. But seeing as he's mining out, I suppose well, he could have actually been at his main and done pretty well. Alright, so the locusts are pulling up. Now this one I blunder. I hit some decent fungals. Need to follow up on some of those banelings, but otherwise not terrible. I certainly would rather these banelings hit my Hydra Queen than hit my spores and Swarmhosts and infestors, if that makes any sense. I feel like actually these tiny bit of Swarmhost, spores, and infestors with the few more Swarmhosts and infestors that are arriving actually is more potent and more threatening than any number of Hydras and Queens. So, I don't know. I think I definitely could have handled the engagement better. As to whether I should have engaged at all with the Hydra Queen, that's a tough one to say. Definitely could have hit cleaner fungals, though. Led with my infestors rather than having them behind. So yeah, we're just continuing to leapfrog. Spores forward, then Swarmhost forward. This is yet another really experimental play on my part. It's something I've only done a handful of times, but more and more, especially since the 45 damage buff, it's something that's become very consistent. It's just a matter of making sure my timing's correct, and making sure I, as you see here, just shuffle a few spores at a time. If I double-click him and uproot everything at once, he gets a window of opportunity there that I don't want to provide him. Because until those finish burrowing, I can't snipe an Overseer, and I can't shoot down any mutas. Alright, and I actually caught a glimpse of that out of the corner of my eye, basically, and kind of recognized that I was able to go a little more aggressive here with these Swarmhosts. Now, I don't necessarily want to go too wild with it, because then that puts me in a position where he's going to be able to pull something off with the Banelings, which looks like he does. I go ahead and get burrowed as quickly as I can here, but I don't really hit any good fungals. Tried to lead, but I kind of forget you can't lead by too much when you're right next to your target. But again, this is an awkward spot for him, because he can do all sorts of damage to the spores, but otherwise he's stuck just kind of manually detonating Banelings and hoping he does enough damage to some very high hit point armored units. So not a lot to happen there with the Baneling response, but given that an Overseer can't get in, it's kind of logical, especially if he's not into Ultralisk yet. Ultralisk does really well, but until then. On my side of the map, he again got that hatchery snipe. Took some losses from the spores, but eventually was able to clean up the couple spores I had covering. And he's able to catch some of my rally. I was actually more focused on keeping this push as aggressive as possible, and hopefully getting to the point that I cut off his production structures. Getting another spore crawler. At this point, the spores, they're important, but when I get this close to his base, I'm actually making things even more awkward, because mutas kill locusts extremely slowly, and that still means he has to hold back and defend, otherwise he's losing all sorts of his tech. Get a huge fungal here, and this is just so cool to see. I mean, look at that. That spore's one-shotting them now. And that's where this really synergizes so well, is you get just one clean fungal with them in range with even just half of their flock of 1 or 2 of your spores, and you will just see such a healthy cleanup. That was what, 4 or 5 consecutive fungals to clean up over half of his mutas. So pretty handy. Losses are well in my favor, as we should see with Swarmhost. I have almost no mining. I'm basically distance mining, and every so often he shuffles over with some speedlings or something, and I have to pull away. So we've got a little bit of a dance going on there. And my gas keeps getting a little higher than my minerals, just because I'm still able to pull off gas mining on my natural while I'm distance mining my main. So I should still be 3 on that. But that means I'm still dumping into infestors more heavily than Swarmhost, which is fine at this stage of the game, because they really are actually more efficient than Swarmhost. Just because it's one of those situations where time is on my side and I need something versatile. And if he does continue into mutas, I don't want to be in a situation where he's able to force some kind of weird trade with me. Particularly since I'm getting to a place where actually my spores are forcing his creep tumors to die when the locusts spawn. But I can easily resolve that. I can fix that with just keeping some overlords along with my army. I just never would foresee that I would run out of creep when making a push against a Zerg opponent, but it happens with this. Definitely happens with this. Yeah, just cleaning them up. So again, we got those Zerglings being really irritating. At this point, I'm not even really concerned about getting that hatchery up. I'm more concerned about just bolstering my army and getting him to the point here where he's no longer able to produce. So in terms of production, what do we have coming up? Tons of spines. And I don't necessarily know that this is going to really be worth anything. Spines don't buy a lot of time versus spores. Do get another hidden base up there. He's just kind of dropping them all over the place, trying to take advantage of my lack of mobility. I don't really feel that spines are the right answer to Swarmhost, because you're not really going to buy more than maybe 1 spawn per 2 to 3 spines versus this many Swarmhosts, especially when upgrades are taken into consideration. I just don't really feel like that's much compared to 8 Zerglings. Actually, more than that when you consider the drone as well. I'm sorry, 8 Zerglings, no. 6 Zerglings, wow, I really am tired. Alright, so at this point, got a ton of energy on my infestors, and I'm already feeling like I'm way ahead. I think this Nidus was to connect his bases, keep himself safe. I'm not entirely sure, but I don't feel like he had the economy to pull that off. I guess he was very gas heavy. But at this point, yeah, I'm perfectly happy since I haven't seen much resistance. I'm seeing him spamming out these spines. I'm perfectly happy to dump my energy as a means of just going ahead and making sure he never reestablishes. I feel like at this point, if I can just keep shutting down bases and keep denying mining, while at the same time finally learning my lesson and keeping a few very buff Zerglings compared to a 0-0 behind, that's really all it's going to take. So we've got a nice long shuffle here. Infestors are popping in here to help out. And apparently my map pack is remarkable. So I thought that was a really fun game. Just because it was one of those where, I don't know, I felt like once I reached that certain point where I lost quite a few Queens and Hydras here before the Swarmhost transition had occurred, I hadn't really maintained enough momentum to say that the game was locked down. In fact, I think at that point he was actually ahead on supply, even though I had yet again denied his third. But because I had let him counter-deny my third so many times, I actually didn't feel that far ahead. I was ahead in upgrades by far, but in terms of supply, I didn't really ever pull ahead till the very end. So I thought this was a really cool example of how just, a few buildings and a few Swarmhosts can just do a world of good. And this may be long term, I don't know. This may be indicative of an imbalance. I feel like the 45 damage Spore Crawler just so heavily hard counters the Muta that when factored in with the fact that the Spore Crawler can move and has such a quick burrow time, we basically have a dedicated anti-air unit. I guess I almost think of it like an anti-air siege tank. It needs a little bit of time to set up. It's got decent range and it hits like a truck. If we can use it in that fashion more and more, I think the Muta metagame is going to completely shut down. Regardless of whether it's with Swarmhost or with Roach Hydra or whatever it may be, the Spore Crawler is a unit, and it's a unit that costs 0 supply. So let's rock on with that. And if anyone goes in the comments and says, "No, Spore Crawler's a building, not a unit," You totally suck. Okay, so that's about it. Thanks a bunch for watching. Oh, and admittedly, I totally also cast this because this guy accused me of map hacking while I was streaming, and I thought that was pretty hilarious. Okay, later, guys.